Before they flew on private jets, they mopped floors. Before they ruled stadiums, they delivered mail. And before one of them helped invent heavy metal, he almost lost his fingers in a factory accident. We act like rock stars were always untouchable, like they were born with the confidence and the sound. But most of them started broke, working normal jobs, and still finding time to chase music when the shift was over. So if you've ever wondered how someone goes from cleaning floors to selling out Wembley, then stick around. I'll walk you through it step by step. We'll start with everyday jobs, then it gets weirder, then it gets heavier. And by the end, you'll hear stories that sound unreal, until you remember this is rock history. Alright, first up, the regular life jobs. The ones that don't sound dramatic, but they explain a lot. Like for example, Bon Scott. You know him as the wild frontman from AC/DC's early era, but before all that, he was a postman in Australia, delivering mail in quiet suburbs, then heading straight back into music at night, because that was the only thing he really cared about. Then Freddie Mercury. Before Queen became Queen, he was working a market stall in London, selling clothes and even some of his own sketches. And when you think about how visual and confident he became later, it doesn't feel random. He was already building that energy. Now take David Bowie. Before he was Bowie, he worked as a butcher's delivery boy, doing early deliveries to afford his first saxophone. It's simple. He wanted the instrument, so he worked for it, long before anyone treated him like some mystery figure. And then there's Eric Clapton. Before the guitar god reputation, he was a bricklayer's assistant, doing physical work where nobody cares how talented you are. They care if you show up and finish the job. That kind of routine builds discipline. After that, the jobs start sounding way less predictable. For instance, Mick Jagger. Before the Rolling Stones became the most famous bad boys on the planet, Mick worked as a porter in a psychiatric hospital, spending his days in quiet, serious corridors. Then, a few years later, he's the guy turning stadiums into chaos with a single step forward. Meanwhile, Malcolm Young, the man behind AC/DC's Engine Room Rhythm, worked as a mechanic in a bra factory, fixing industrial sewing machines. It sounds random, but the environment fits. Machines, repetition, timing. And later you hear AC/DC, and it's that same unstoppable rhythm. And Chris Cornell is another one that doesn't sound real until you hear it. Before Soundgarden, he worked as a fish handler at a seafood wholesaler, cleaning slime, throwing guts into buckets, doing work that's repetitive and unpleasant. But he said he liked it because his mind stayed free. And that contrast is crazy. One of the greatest voices in rock, writing melodies in his head while doing a job most people would quit fast. Now this next part is where it starts getting more personal, because these jobs don't just sound rough, they leave a mark. Take Kurt Cobain. Before Nevermind changed everything, Kurt worked as a janitor at his own high school, cleaning toilets in the place he used to walk through as a student, then using that paycheck to help fund early Nirvana demos, so later, when his songs feel tired, angry, and honest, it doesn't feel like a character. It feels like real life turning into music. Then you've got Tom Araya from Slayer. By night, he's screaming about war and death with zero mercy. But by day, he was a respiratory therapist, literally helping patients breathe. That jump from a hospital shift to a stage says a lot about how someone can carry intensity in two completely different worlds. On a different angle, John Bon Jovi was a janitor too, but the detail that matters is where. He worked at the Power Station recording studio, right next to the rooms where real records were being made. He watched, he listened, and when the rooms were empty, he used the moment to work on his own demos. He didn't start famous, but he definitely started close, and that proximity matters more than people admit. Now sometimes it's not the job that's the craziest part. It's the moment where everything flips. Here's Zakk Wylde. He was pumping gas in New Jersey, working long shifts and playing local bars at night. Then he hears Ozzy Osbourne is looking for a guitarist. So he records a rough demo on cassette, mails it in, and goes back to work because he can't afford to just wait around. Weeks go by, then one day the phone rings. And it's Ozzy. Overnight, he goes from smelling like gasoline to playing arenas. That's how a break looks in real life, normal right up until it isn't. And then there's Gene Simmons. Before Kiss became a global spectacle, he worked at Vogue magazine in New York. He spent his days in an office, answering calls, handling paperwork, moving through a world built on image and presentation. It's an interesting contrast because when people look at Kiss and see the face paint, the logos, the larger-than-life personas, they think it's just rock spectacle. But Gene had already been studying branding and visual impact long before the makeup ever went on. And now the heavy stories, the ones that aren't cool, they're just intense and they stick with you. First, Ozzy Osbourne. Before Black Sabbath, Ozzy worked in a slaughterhouse. He described how the smell made him sick and how it clung to him. And it's a brutal contrast. Because when people hear early Sabbath and feel that doom, they think it's just an image. But Ozzy had already been around death in a way most people never will. Then, Jonathan Davis. Before Korn, he studied mortuary science and worked as an embalmer, spending his days in quiet rooms preparing bodies, doing work most people can't even imagine. That kind of job changes how you see everything. And later, when Korn sounds raw and personal, it doesn't feel like an act. It feels like someone who's lived heavy things and learned how to turn it into music. And finally, Tony Iommi. Tony was working in a sheet metal factory. On his last day before leaving to focus on music, a machine came down and severed the tips of his fretting fingers. Doctors told him he'd never play again, but he didn't quit. He made his own fingertip covers from melted plastic. And because pressing the strings normally was difficult, he tuned his guitar down and loosened the tension. That lower, heavier sound became the blueprint for Black Sabbath, and it helped set the direction for heavy metal itself. One workplace accident didn't just change his life, it changed what guitars would sound like for decades. So yeah, next time you see a rock star on stage and it looks effortless, just remember, most of them had a whole life before that, and it wasn't pretty. It was long shifts, low pay, and trying to keep a dream alive when real life kept getting in the way. And that's why these jobs hit different. It's not just what they did for money. It says a lot about who they were before anyone cared, and sometimes you can even hear a bit of that in the music later. If you enjoyed this, drop a comment with one rock or metal artist and the job they had before they made it, and I'll pick the best ones for part 2. And if you want more videos like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next upload. Rock you in the next video.